There's no question that there's great vibes around the Sacramento Kings right now with the team on a 5-game win streak. But the question is, will those vibes last? Chris Watkins from SacTown Sports 1140 joins me as we balance reality with the fun of the last week or so under interim head coach Doug Christie. It's all right here for you on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I am a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And yeah, we're all having fun. It's impossible not to have fun with how the Sacramento Kings have been playing, especially the Kings' most recent win, that comeback double overtime victory over the Miami Heat to make it 5 wins in a row. I don't know if you've checked the standings lately, but the Kings are moving on up and are right back in the thick of the Western Conference race. It's a lot of fun right now, but is this a short-term fun, or is this who the Sacramento Kings now are under interim head coach Doug Christie? Chris Watkins from SacTown Sports 1140 joins me. We'll discuss, talk our way through it. And don't be alarmed when the reality of who the Sacramento Kings are and have been starts to take over the vibes of how the Kings are playing currently. I don't know about you, Chris Watkins. I've quite enjoyed these couple of days of no Sacramento Kings basketball, especially considering the Kings have been moving up in the standings without even playing. I opened the standings this morning. The Kings are tied with the San Antonio Spurs for the 10th spot, which is the final play-in spot. They're only half a game back at 9th, and they're only like 2.5 games out of the 6th seed. We're going to talk a lot about whether or not the way the Kings have been playing recently, if it's for real or not. But very quickly, the Kings are right back into this race, which is a welcome sign considering where we were at like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, man, it's crazy how quickly things can turn. Before the Kings kind of went on their run, funny enough, the first game of the Doug Christie era was against the Los Angeles Lakers. They had gone through a pretty similar process where obviously the season started and everybody was praising JJ Redick and talking about the job he did. They go on a huge, I wouldn't call it a losing streak, but just really start to struggle and find some turmoil in the season. And then as we saw in that first Doug Christie game, they looked great, and now they're a top 5 seed, and for them, hopefully, they're hoping there's no looking back. And I think that's what the Kings are at least hoping this is right now, is that this isn't just some new head coach bump that we see in sports all the time, that this is a legitimate energy shift. And, I think, Matt, you and I have both known Doug for a couple years. I think everything that we've seen from him so far in his tenure has just been incredibly Doug Christie. And that's the thing that I've just continued to say is that, I don't really believe in just the traditional sense of, hey, you're going to fire a coach and then you see immediate success with the new guy. That's usually what's going to happen, but it's going to be temporary. But I just firmly believe that if it's going to be anybody that can have some sort of staying power, it feels like Doug Christie just has that charisma that is just incredibly authentic and hard to find.
Yeah, there's not many examples in the history of the NBA where interim head coaches work out. It just doesn't really happen. One of the most famous situations is like Ty Lue, and Ty Lue has become, of course, a phenomenal head coach, which may be what we're seeing here, the start of Doug Christie's true opportunity to become a phenomenal head coach. But what you said there, you said charisma, and I think that's what's important. What Doug has that separates himself from anybody else, and I said this a couple episodes ago, if Doug Christie does become a full-time successful head coach in the NBA, it's going to be because of his personality and his ability as a motivator. But the question is, Chris, because the Kings really, they're not doing too much different from the Mike Brown era, which is common when you have a coach take over in the middle of the season. So the question becomes, Like, is it simply his ability as a motivator? Is it simply just him being easier to play for? Is that really the difference between the Kings going on a 6-game losing streak? Well, to be fair, one of them was under Doug, but we put that up pretty much under Mike. The 6-game losing streak and a 5-game winning streak. Is the difference simply that Doug is just better to play for?
That's what I think they want you to believe right now, is that this is just simply a vibe thing, that you change up the vibe and everything else is great. But yeah, I think that's kind of the tough thing to figure out. Again, is just like how much of this really is just that they needed to change up the energy, and how much of this is Doug Christie putting in like practical stuff like he's talked about. I mean, there's been some X's and O's things that he's discussed, simplifying the offense. You just in general feel like these guys are playing a little bit more free flow in their offense specifically. You know, Mike, I think Doug has actually said it a couple different times, but I think he said, the quote is, "I don't want to call plays. I want them to play basketball," or something like that, where essentially he's saying, I want to get to the point where, I mean, really, practice is practice, and that's where we really get all the hard work done. Once we go into the games, it's a huge cliche, but the games are just essentially a I don't know what the performance of what we've been practicing this whole time. It shouldn't even really be thinking or changing up plans or anything like that. You should just go out there and know what the situation calls for and be able to execute it by yourself. And, you know, I guess to answer the question that you initially stated, the funny thing is, I think Mike Brown was doing that, right? Like, Mike Brown has been saying for his entire, now I have to speak of it in past, Mike Brown spoke about it his entire tenure about, look, I know it's literally from season 1, he said, I know at some point my voice is going to get tired in this locker room. There needs to be internal leadership, a voice from within that sparks some sort of rally cry for this unit. And, you know, I can do all the coaching. I can be coach of the year. That's all great. None of it's going to matter if these guys don't start having some accountability. So, you know, I guess my answer would be no. Like, I don't think Doug really has, I don't want to say he hasn't changed much, but I don't think it's been a wholesale shift from one side of the fence to the other side of the fence. I think I've kind of stated it as, like, I think Mike might have been like in the middle, if not, you know, slightly towards the Doug side of the fence, and Doug just kind of, I guess you could say, again, reshifted the energy back wholly to that other side of the fence.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying completely. I think Doug has recognized what got him into this position, essentially what got the Kings to this point in the season, which is clearly they did either tune Mike out or Mike lost him or whatever. And I'll this is another conversation for another time, another hill to die on, but I will also stand in Mike Brown's corner and say, if the players are quitting on Mike for saying the things that needed to be said, I think that's a poor reflection on the players than it is on Mike specifically. But that ship has sailed. Mike is gone. I think what Doug has done is, like you say, kind of flipped it 180, where Mike was very publicly willing to call guys out or preach accountability. Doug, I feel, is kind of being the complete opposite of, man, I love these players. He's pouring love into these guys. I love these players. It's on them. It's all about them. And I appreciate that from Doug, because he knows how to play the game. He's been a player before. He's also very media savvy, as we know, working at SacTown Sports 1140 for years, working as a Kings broadcaster. He knows how to play both sides. So I appreciate that from Doug. But the same way Mike's voice of accountability and kind of being a hard ass gets tiring or gets old, I think Doug's could do the exact same thing if the Kings start losing again. Like, if the Kings tactically start falling short, which they haven't yet, and that's been great. They've been winning off of heart. I thought Doug Christie against Miami was outclassed tactically by Eric Spoelstra, there's nothing wrong with that. It's Eric freaking Spoelstra. But the Heat went to a zone. The Kings had zero answer for it without De'Aaron Fox, to be fair. They got back in that game and won that game purely off of heart and taking advantage of the Heat kind of being in a vulnerable state without Jimmy Butler, and their season's been kind of in a downward spiral as of right now. That's not a bad thing. I'm just saying, I wonder if the message starts to get old, and this is not an anti-Doug thing, by the way. I think this speaks more about the state of this team. If the Kings start losing games, and hopefully they don't, and they have Boston coming up on Friday, which I think most people expect to be a loss. But if the Kings start losing games and Doug's out there continuously saying, oh, I love these guys, it's all about them, it's all about them, what is stopping the message from becoming old again? And we just get right back into this cycle. I'm very curious to see if Doug can keep the Kings from falling back into that spot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the most logical, next step question to have. Like, I think that it's just frankly dumb to think that this is just going to continue to be the case, and that this whatever problem you thought that Mike Brown caused is now all of a sudden fixed because Doug Christie is now the head man in charge. I mean, I don't think you have to apologize at all. I mean, I just think that that's absolutely the logical thing. And I think, frankly, again, we both know Doug. We love Doug. I mean, as a person especially, I mean, that guy is, again, as legitimate and authentic as they come, which is why I do believe if this new coach theory is going to turn into just not a new coach theory, but it's just Doug Christie is a good coach. Like, I do believe that he's the kind of guy that would be able to kind of not overcome, but to not fall into that kind of thing. But I don't know, man. I mean, everything else, I guess I'll like the sports history side of me tells me that, this happens. And I can believe that Doug is special, but, he might be the exception to the rule, but I just know the rule, and the rule really does state that often these things do come crashing back down to earth. And, a lot of people have, especially with the situation the Kings are in right now, have been bringing up the, interim coach successes and things like that. Brendan, our friend Brendan Nunez always brings up the Ime Udoka situation with Joe Mazzulla and him taking over. There's the Ty Lue situation with Cleveland where he takes over. And the one that we always mention as the forgotten one is Nate McMillan taking over in the middle of the season and leading that Atlanta Hawks team, which had Kevin Huerter on that squad to the Eastern Conference Finals that season. That's really the closest you can get to this Doug Christie situation end up being successful. And I've been saying the difference of that is that, and Brendan asked Kevin about it, that was literally right before All-Star break. And so that's a 20-game sprint. Doug Christie has 50 games to coach the rest of this season. We've only gone through 6 of them. Like you said, at some point here, there's going to be a losing streak. There's going to be, as a matter of fact, it might be right around the corner. The Kings have gotten very fortunate with the matchups that they've gotten here so far, and credit them. They just won a tough double overtime game without De'Aaron Fox. That would have been an impossible thing to even think that they could do, even as recently as a month ago. But I don't know, man. I just feel like there's going to be some crash down to reality, and I'm not even saying that that's going to be the end of this Doug Christie good vibes thing, but I just kind of always say, like, you're not any team, any sport. You're not tested when you're 14-0. You're tested when you lose, and then the real test isn't even when you lose. The test is how you bounce back. Like that, everybody is going to meet some adversity at some point. The real champions are made by how you respond when you get knocked down. Does it kill you? Does it take a peg out of you? Or do you just shake it off and able to return to the team that you are? And I think we've seen when things are good for this Sacramento Kings team, things are good. Things are fine. But the second one thing goes bad, it feels like things start to tumble. And right now, everything's great. They're all vibing. The beam is lit. And, they got to go see the beam in person. But at some point here, like, they're going to meet some adversity, and that's where we're going to have to seriously start to ask the questions, like, maybe we shouldn't have a guy who hasn't been in that spot before trying to save our season right now.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Ultimate GM. I want to take a moment to introduce you to a brand new mobile game that I am addicted to. It's Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach. If you've ever dreamed of being a college basketball head coach, it's your chance to step into those shoes. With Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach, you control every little detail of your program, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to oversee training camps, handling NIL deals, managing scholarships. It's all right there in your hands. And when it comes to game time, you get to draw up offensive plays, set your strategy. The way you play won't just affect your current season, it'll shape the future of your school's basketball program. It's a game that lets you feel the full weight of what it means to be a head coach and lead your team to glory. Here's a special offer for Locked On NBA listeners. If you use promo code LOCKEDONCBB, all in capital letters, inside the game store, you'll get a free boost for your program. It's the perfect way to kickstart your coaching career. To download Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach, which is Ultimate College Basketball HC. Just visit ultimate-cbb.com and look it up on the App Store. Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. I don't mean to sell Doug short as a tactician either, because of course he's a brilliant basketball mind, and having the opportunity to talk to him the way he breaks down a game is pretty incredible, being a former player. I think the thing he's done the best tactically to this point, Chris, is he's tried to get the Kings back to what they were. And it on paper, in theory, makes complete sense when Mike Brown would say, we have to learn to play defense. We have to be more than what we were 2 years ago defensively if we want to actually make it out of the first round and actually compete for a championship. In doing that, though, the Kings never got back to what they were offensively, which was their meal ticket. And of course, they haven't been back to the postseason since, even though it's only been a year and a freaking half since the man was the unanimous coach of the year. But we just forget that all of a sudden because of recency bias. Regardless, Doug has done a really good job, I think, of putting the ball back into the hands of the guys and letting them be themselves and letting them letting their play to their strengths, right? Which is good. And the Kings have a very obvious strength on the offensive end. The problem is, though, what happens when the strength reaches that limit? And this is where I don't even talk about Doug Christie. You were saying earlier, like, do the Kings start to question if they can win with a coach who hasn't been there and done that before? I, again, go right back to the players. And I'm like, if the Kings fall into the same problem again, if they hit a wall again and start to slow down again and start to lose again, and the guys look disheartened, they hang their heads, they start to make dumb mental mistakes at the end of games, shoot themselves in the foot like we saw so many times over the course of this season, then you have to look at the roster and go, no, it's y'all. Right. And that's where I wonder how aggressively this front office, who also carries a significant amount of the blame for everything that's happened, how aggressively the front office looks at this trade deadline and looks at this next month and goes, do we try and make the swing? Do we try and go for it and see if we can have Doug turn into that Nate McMillan story and have the Kings go on this major run? Or do we evaluate where we're at, recognize, okay, in the offseason, we might have a De'Aaron Fox decision to make. We'll have a decision to make about Doug Christie and kind of reset there. I think the Kings are in a very weird spot of limbo that is being masked by the fun of these last 5 games. Not that we're trying to be negative. This is just reality. There's a lot of time left, which can be a good thing in the sense that they can make up all the ground from the start of the season. It can also be a bad thing where the Kings can fall right back to where they were and the good vibes wear off.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think that's the big question is, what is the front office going to do next? Like, and, you know, frankly, I would tie it all the way back to the Mike Brown decision and say that, I don't know, man. I just feel like you don't make that decision unless you have some plan, like, fully flushed out. And that's the part that still just has not sat well with me since the Mike Brown firing. Is, to me, that is the first domino to fall in a series of a domino effect. And that's what it should be. Like, if you're making a decision that big with where this team is at in their development, that you should know what the rollout plan is going to be after that. To me, that's the one thing that's been incredibly concerning, is that I kind of feel like that was just a very hyper-reactionary move that they didn't know what was going to follow. They didn't know, okay, we're going to fire Mike Brown, but we have to think about how this affects the De'Aaron Fox negotiations. We have to think how this can maybe affect if we are going to make a trade in the middle of this season. Do we feel comfortable? And this is the biggest question with Doug Christie for me. If we're going to trade for Cam Johnson and say, hey, we are putting some more chips into this basket, well, now do you feel like you have a coach that can properly put this very delicate roster balance into the right position? Or would you rather have a guy who's been in the NBA for 20 years, has been in that seat multiple times, has won Coach of the Year multiple times? Like, that's the part of this that doesn't make sense to me from the Kings perspective or from the front office perspective. And that's why, if you're going to ask me what the Kings front office is thinking to do next, I don't know, because I don't think they know. Because to me, when you fire Mike Brown, you should know we're firing Mike Brown. That means De'Aaron Fox is now on the trade block. That means that we're now moving into, we can call it rebuilding, you can call it retooling. We're moving on to a different phase. Or does this mean, okay, no, we're firing Mike Brown, but we're still full steam ahead. Doug Christie's the coach moving forward. This is just a little setback that we're not going to think about again because we still have faith in this entire unit, and we're moving forward. Right now, I think they want you to believe that it's the latter, but I mean, Sam Amick was on with Dave and Jason this morning talking about, he just believes that the writing's on the wall with De'Aaron Fox at this point. And if that's the case, maybe that's a whole different podcast you can have me on for, Matt. But I don't know. I mean, I just feel like if you're in that spot, to me, not to just completely shift it, but I don't get the wait till the offseason to trade De'Aaron Fox. Like, I understand that maybe some of the teams that are most interested in Fox, like the Spurs or possibly like the Houston Rockets, maybe want to play out the season first and see where they stand after that. But from the Kings' perspective, De'Aaron Fox's value is highest right now, where a team can say, okay, we get a year and a half. We don't just get a year where he can play for us for the year and he can say he wants to re-sign, but whatever. If you get somebody in your system for a year and a half, you can really increase your chances of keeping that player, and that adds value for the Kings' return. And I don't know. I just feel like, again, since they fired Mike Brown, I just kind of feel like there's one path that makes logical sense, and any other path you're going down is just a path that you're forcing. And frankly, I think we all know, because they were already heading down that path with Mike Brown. I just don't know if that path leads anywhere past at best, like a second round appearance.
Yeah, the Kings are at a crossroads. What you're getting at is the Kings are at a crossroads. And the image that I have in my brain is you're on the highway, right? And it splits into two different areas. And then they have that divider in the middle. It's that yellow thing that has the arrows that basically shows you, like, this is a roadblock. You're going to hit this. You're going to die. Yeah. And the Kings are waiting and waiting and waiting and are getting closer and closer to that roadblock. And the question is, like, what is the plan? How would we freaking know? Because you won't have your general manager come out and actually speak and share with us the thought process behind the decision of firing your head coach. And if the Sacramento
Matt, I mean, I believe there's a very famous quote by, I believe it's a Yogi Berra-ism. When there's a fork in the road, take it.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like the Kings are doing.
Well, and here's the thing. Like, they're just not talking to us. They're not. And look, media, they owe us an explanation. It's not us they owe an explanation. It's their fans. It's the people that are paying the money.
Players, too.
It's the players, too. Like, what are
the players who don't have to answer for this.
Right.
Or shouldn't have to answer.
And if they were to wait, De'Aaron Fox is the one being thrown in front of the media more than anybody else, having to talk about Mike Brown being fired. General manager's nowhere to be seen. Owner is sitting courtside again. That's good. But like, we haven't gotten any answers. So we don't know what the direction is. Do the Sacramento Kings see De'Aaron Fox as their long-term future? Do they think they want to make it work? Okay, so are you going to use the rest of this season to bank on Doug Christie's good vibes to swoon De'Aaron Fox and convince him to stay and convince Rich Paul to stick around here? Because it doesn't look like a Supermax contract as of now is happening, because De'Aaron Fox is not playing well enough, nor are the Kings doing well enough for him to win or to be an all-NBA player. That's the reality of where the Sacramento Kings are at this point in time. So you talk about we're talking about a crossroads here. What direction are the Sacramento Kings going in? And you can ask that question in a number of ways. Where's the roster going? Where's the organization going? And then, like you're talking about, where are you going with De'Aaron Fox? Because if you're waiting until this offseason, you can say you have a better chance of getting better this offseason, which I think is probably the most likely route that the Kings go if they're going to move Fox. But at the same time, are you just wasting time, or do you believe that you can still salvage this situation? All signs that we have point to the Kings thinking they can salvage this situation. But by trying to salvage it, They're doing the exact opposite because they're firing the guy that De'Aaron Fox is friends with. There was just a photo that went out on Instagram. Fox and Mike Brown had dinner together the other night in Roseville. There is no animosity between these two. Fox was that idea that Fox was the reason Mike Brown got fired is cooked, stupid, dumb. It doesn't exist, right? Maybe there were other players involved. Maybe there weren't. It's all speculation at this point. But if you want Fox, if you want to keep Fox, if you believe Fox is still your building block going forward, you fired the coach that he's gone to bat for. You've put him back in this cycle of dysfunction that he started his career in. Kings, you're not doing a very good job of convincing the guy to stick around. So what is the plan? What is the plan? The Kings don't know. They're winning games right now, which is great. But is the plan just to hope that those vibes continue? Because you're betting against the house at that point, and the odds are not on your side.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of think that that's what they're hoping. I think they're hoping that De'Aaron Fox isn't, somebody who's going to be a malcontent, somebody who's not going to, publicly voice his frustrations, at least to a level that makes it uncomfortable. And, if you want to play that game, go ahead. But I just think Rich Paul is somebody who's very, very, very willing to play that game.
Yeah, Rich will do it for him. Fox doesn't have to say anything.
Gladly.
Rich will do all of it.
Gladly. And, I think that's, people are going to get mad at it, but that's literally what the agent is there for. I think De'Aaron is handled this like a professional. I think he wants to handle this like a professional. I don't think he wants to make this messy, but Rich Paul is frankly in the mess business, and I think that's pretty much what we're going to see here pretty soon, especially when the Kings do go on some sort of losing streak. Matt, like you said, I mean, we know De'Aaron Fox's relationship with Mike Brown is very tight, and even is still tight to this day. It's another reason why you don't do it, and frankly, it's been a really popular topic on our Return of the Roar podcast these past couple episodes. I don't want to make it into there's this side of the fence and there's that side of the fence, but you listen to some of the post-game comments, and it's very clear that there are people who were Team Mike Brown and Team not Mike Brown, and I'm just curious, the people who were, we'll just say Team Christie, not in a showboaty or angry or whatever kind of way, but they've been very vocal about how much they have enjoyed the Doug Christie experience. And I know De'Aaron Fox does like Doug Christie, actually likes Doug Christie a lot as well, and doesn't feel like this is Doug, pulling some deep level power move or anything like that to get the guy that De'Aaron wants out of there or anything like that. But I'm more just saying I wouldn't be surprised when the Kings eventually do find some hard times here soon, if maybe De'Aaron starts to, make some funny comments like, oh, I guess it wasn't just the coach or something like that. I just feel like there's going to be clear factions here, and I hope it all stays civil. Again, we've seen everybody seem kumbaya. We see, just as an example, we see De'Aaron and Domas still hugging all the time and stuff. But I do wonder, something as divisive as this, I do wonder if at some point here we maybe see the locker room fracture.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, sports, music, theater, comedy, whatever it is. One of my favorite memories is that I have growing up is, of course, going to Kings games inside of Arco Arena, Sacramento. We've got our theaters here. Amazing theatrical productions come through. I'm a comedy junkie myself, so whether different comedians come to local casinos or different theaters, I love going and checking those out. Whatever events that I go to, I only go to Game Time to get my tickets, because Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature Game Time Picks. The feature filters out all of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Whether you're looking for tickets to upcoming Sacramento Kings game inside the Golden One Center, maybe you want to follow the team and get some tickets on the road, or any shows coming through Sacramento or wherever you're at, or maybe you're on vacation in Las Vegas and you want to get tickets in Vegas to a show, for example. There's so many different ways. They're all in pricing, which is such a simple feature that is so important. It shows you all the total costs up front. You won't be hit with surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. I do know, and I can already see my comment section, Chris. We got to mentally prepare for it because there are going to be people in the conversation, comment section, and emails, and people on social media saying, "Matt, why are you still talking about this? Why are we still? Mike is gone. Why do you?" Because the repercussions of this decision are going to carry out and have a ripple effect through the rest of this year. Number one, and number two is. Yeah, maybe. And number two is, how can you have closure when the organization hasn't even given you a path?
Right.
Like so the reality is this is going to be a part of the decision. Are the vibes good right now? And has Doug Christie changed this team for the better short term? 100%. And we can acknowledge that and both enjoy that. Look, Chris and I would rather the Sacramento Kings be good and Mike Brown be gone than Mike Brown stay here and the Kings be bad. We all want the same thing. But the reality, we have to look past recency bias. And I think that is how this decision came about, was recency bias and frustration of what's been happening in the short term versus where the Sacramento Kings are at and where they have gone long term. And we go back to the Rich Paul conversation when talking about the future of De'Aaron Fox. Let me just throw this question out for everybody. Who do you trust more? Do you trust the front office to handle this professionally and successfully? I say successfully for the organization, not for Fox, successfully for the Kings. Or do you trust Rich Paul more to get the best for his client and get his way? You have to trust Rich Paul based off of his track record, right? Not this organization based off of theirs. So that's just the reality of where this team is. Again, we hope the good vibes continue, and we're very happy to see the Kings are right back into this race. But Chris, I said this on my last podcast after the Kings win, their comeback win against Miami. Who the Kings are right now in the standings is exactly who the Kings have been all season long. They go down into a hole, they fight all the way back out of it, but more often than not, they've been losing. So the Kings go in a 6-game under 500 hole. They fought all the way back to now a game under 500 right back into the mix. Are they suddenly going to start winning and suddenly keep this train going, or are they going to fall right back to what they've been? That's just the crossroads we're at.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been confused about this team's standings all year long because, I think that, frankly, at the start of the year, I expected them to be a top 5 seed. Pretty no questions asked. Like, I thought they were going to be a 50-win team. I thought the DeMar signing was going to be huge. I thought more so in the clutch. Like, I just thought it was going to be a positive for them. Not only is it a negative, it's not neutral. They have, it's just been a straight negative for them. Like, they have lost games actively in the clutch instead of it being really like a counterbalance scale to where it's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have won that game, but since we have so many good clutch performers, we actually won more games than we should have. And so the fact that they aren't a good team essentially and haven't been all season long or for a majority of this season already has my barometer of this team a little messed up. And so I kind of feel like this is how they should have, much better than this. They should, in my opinion, they should be a couple games above 500, or at least in that, there's a couple teams that are like 21-16, those kind of ranges. I just am surprised that the Kings are even here. So I say all that to say, I think they should be 500. I don't think it's crazy that they're 500. It wouldn't surprise me if they go on a streak and they end up 3 to 5 games above 500, because I think that's the team that they were talent-wise from the beginning of the year. They just weren't playing like it. And I think that's what's just so confusing about trying to gauge. Not that I don't think they should be incredibly active and try and get some big names in the trade market, but I think that's the tough part about exploring the trade market for me is I could have seen a world where something as simple as bringing in just Dorian Finney-Smith would have made like a similar level flip to what we're seeing now. And so I don't know. I still kind of wonder, like, if they are going to go out and get a Cam Johnson or something like that, is that almost going to be too big of an acquisition to the point of, well, you already were struggling to figure out where each piece of talent goes now. You're adding this massive, massive piece, and then you throw in, again, like we stated earlier, the Doug Christie is in a new spot of integrating pieces in the middle of a season where he's never had to do that before. I don't know. I all of it is to say, man, like, yeah, they could I don't think anything they do would surprise me right now. Like, they could trade De'Aaron Fox next week, and the rest of the season could be a sell job, and we could be trying to get a top 10 pick. That wouldn't surprise me. They can go again. They could end up as a non-play-in team, a top 6 team the rest of this season. It wouldn't surprise me, and it wouldn't surprise me if they just continue to flounder. And yeah, maybe they go on some streaks, and then they go on some losing streaks. Like, if they just continue to be up and down all year long. Like, I think that really, like we've been stating, like, this is a real crossroads moment for this team, and I think that they could realistically take whatever path they want. I think there's some beauty in that. There's definitely some power to take in that, but it's also just, with this organization specifically, when it comes to the Sacramento Kings, every time it feels like there's some crucial decision that needs to be made. I can't even give you a hit percentage on how many times they actually end up getting it right.
Well, I'll put us both on the spot here to wrap up. Gut feeling, do we think De'Aaron Fox is part of the Kings' long-term future?
I would say no. I would say mainly just because I think I don't think it's contentious. I just think that I don't think they align. I just don't think that they're in lockstep right now, and I think they both want success right now, but I just think the way that the Kings are going to want to go about it isn't going to mesh with how De'Aaron feels like the direction should go. So I would say that, yeah, I think it's more likely to happen in the offseason, but again, like I said earlier, if you're going to trade De'Aaron Fox, to me, you trade him before the deadline, and you get as much of a return as possible, and you try and get this thing back to where it should be as soon as possible.
I'm also going to say no. I think if you're going to keep De'Aaron Fox, you need a plan. And not only do we not know what the Sacramento Kings plan is, or even if they have a plan, all signs of their plan point more to moving on from Fox than keeping De'Aaron Fox. So just reading the signs and reading the tea leaves, again, that's all we can go off of because we haven't heard from anybody in the organization. It just points to De'Aaron Fox on the way out. We'll see how it all plays out. Chris Watkins covers the Sacramento Kings for SacTown Sports 1140. Follow SacTown Sports 1140 on Instagram specifically so you can see all of the amazing graphics that Chris makes. Also, one thing that I wish I could steal and claim as my own is Chris's banner on Twitter is Arco Arena with a beam coming out of it, and I love that so much. You have no idea. Mm-hmm. But Chris, thanks for coming on, my man. I appreciate you taking the time. Yeah. We'll see how this whole thing plays out, and I'm sure we'll get back together, reconvene, and talk about what happens. It's roll the dice at this point.
Yeah, can't wait. And I share with you that I am very glad that the Kings are on this road trip right now, because with how things have been going, the emotions of it all, like I think we can all use just a little bit of a break for now.
Yeah, 9 home games out of 11 I love Kings basketball in the Golden One Center. I was tired of seeing y'all. I was tired of being there.
Yeah. So I was tired of this. What was it? A 6-game losing streak or 5-game home losing streak? They went
5
on 4
straight.
Game.
Yeah,
it was something crazy.
It was brutal. But all right, go win some games on the road, Kings, and make us feel a little bit better. But at least they're winning right now.